Welcome to Discovery Watch with John Kaiser.
I'm your host, Jim Goddard. John, welcome back to the show.
Jim, it's a pleasure to be back.
John, why is Eskay Mining Corp up even through winter, is chasing everybody out of the Golden Triangle?
Jim, that's a really good question, because usually at the end of the season, when there's no more drilling being done, the market just loses interest and says, okay, we'll pick you up cheap in December during tax loss selling season and prepare for next year. But in the case of Eskay Mining, they put out a news release on October 16th, which did not have any assay values. They did put out some assays in September, but they were just for initial couple holes. But what that news release did do was give a very good qualitative description of what was accomplished at Eskay Creek on Eskay Mining's Sib-Lulu Quarry project in the Golden Triangle. And the focus was the what they call the TV Jeff zone. It's about 15 kilometers south of the original Eskay Creek mine, and they drilled 20 holes in about 200 meters average hole, and nearly all of them intersected VMS-style mineralization, and interestingly, they described it in three forms. One is the mudstone replacement style, such as what Skeena gets in its lower mudstone and its even lower mudstone, and what the original Lulu mineralization was all about. They intersected it in feeder stockwork zones, which is similar to what Skeena has in the 21C zone that sits beneath the 21B zone that is now mined out. And they included bedded massive sulfides, which is what you would find at the contact mudstone where the 21B zone was, where the smoker exhaled everything onto the ocean floor and it piled up and created the massive sulfides rich with both base metals and, in the case of the Eskay Creek region, gold and silver. And they've indicated that they've intersected stacks of these massive sulfide lenses. They did not give us any quantitative information about thicknesses, and that's a clue. If they had a 20-meter interval of massive sulfides, we would have heard about it. And what they were doing was following up work done 25 years ago during the initial exploration wave. The geology of the region wasn't understood very well. And one of the interesting things that came out of this news release is that they are now pretty confident about their hypothesis that in the southern part of the Eskay Mining's property, which is about sort of 20 kilometers out of a 28-kilometer strike of prospective VMS stratigraphy, they have the eastern limb of an anticline. And up in the north where the Eskay Creek mine is and down into the Sib-Lulu area, that is the western limb. And an anticline is when the original flat stratigraphy gets folded, the spine ends up being eroded away, and so you have a limb on one side dipping, say, to the west in this case because it strikes north-south, and to the east. And this was not understood by the earlier explorationists who were able to intersect VMS mineralization, but in follow-up holes they couldn't establish any continuity. And these 20 holes that the company drilled under the guidance of John de Decker, they were not able to do this with the benefit of the geophysical surveys, which had tremendous delays this year because of the low cloud cover, the overcastness, and it took forever to get it done. They now have all this data, and most of this drilling was focused sort of in the 1.5 kilometer distance between the TV and Jeff zones, the original zones. And now as they're looking at the geophysical data, which they have not published yet for the rest of us to see, they can see that in this area they're dealing with about 4 kilometers of strike of this prospective stratigraphy. Now the thing that I found interesting in this press release was their suggestion that going up section, which means higher up in the stratigraphy to the east, and they make it clear that the stratigraphy dips to the east, it may be possible to find additional units where massive sulfides, bedded massive sulfides exist. Now, they haven't said that they found anything resembling the contact mudstone. One of the in a podcast that Quentin Henney did last week, he talked about the missing rhyolite unit, which sits beneath the 21B zone, which in turn sits beneath the basalt. And he came up with this idea that he thinks that the rhyolite unit was injected into that mudstone area there, and that it's not necessary for it to be there. And I was puzzled about that because a rhyolite is a volcanic extrusion that, upwells and then sort of flows. It's quite viscous, so it doesn't flow as far as a basalt, but it generally goes sideways and covers everything up. And how it was supposed to have been injected into this area beneath the mudstone unit, or the contact mudstone and the lower mudstone unit, well, that wasn't clear to me. But it's been explained that quite likely the unit, the sediments in the marine setting there, they would not have been severely consolidated yet at the time. So yeah, if you have a volcanic vent that's spewing the rhyolite out, it could even go sideways underneath into the still unconsolidated sediments that are piling up in the ocean floor. So that's the explanation for that. But it doesn't really matter, because the model, what we're dealing with here, is of a hydrothermal system coming up and passing through all the layers that are already present, going through cracks and fissures, developing a feeder zone, and then venting itself onto the ocean floor as a smoker-style system. And the three styles that they described are of this type of mineralogy, the sort of a fluid chemistry that would have soaked sideways into existing older mudstone units, what they call the replacement style, and then continued on to a feeder to other volcanics where there are cracks and fissures, so it develops a stockwork type mineralization, and then eventually finding a seafloor vent and creating the bedded massive sulfides. And it may even be possible that they have stacked sets of bedded massive sulfides, which would be very interesting because it would suggest a multi-pulsing system, whereas at Eskay Creek, it appears to have been only one major pulse which went through there and deposited its big 2.5 million ton 21B zone. And when that stopped, the basalt layer paved it over, and that was the end of the story. However, John DeDecker has pointed out to me and said the faulting in this area of TV and Jeff is complex, and it could be that we're seeing the same time horizon displaced and moved around. So until they've done much more modeling of the geology and got all the results back, it's too early to tell if we're dealing with multiple pulses or simply the main horizon shifted around and refolded over on top. So what can we expect? Why is the stock trending up when, we should get results, trickling in over the next 6 weeks, with no obvious indication that there's a huge 21B zone intersection like hole 109 back in 1989, whenever that Eskay Creek was discovered, waiting for us? Well, the reason is that in their news release, which had no diagrams of maps or sections or anything in it, they did provide photos of the different types of mineralization that they intersected. And a couple of them showed electrum, which is a gold-silver alloy, and what's colloquially called ruby silver, which is a native silver type of mineral. It's actually not a mineral, it's a sulfur salt, but it's quite specific. And this appears to be not in any sort of bedded massive sulfide, but this seems to be in the feeder system. And they've used an XRF unit to measure the approximate grade ranges of whatever zinc, lead, or copper is present in the sulfide zones. And maybe they have a sense of the silver, but they have no sense of the gold. But the fact that we're willing to show that these specks exist, are visible within the core, suggests maybe that in addition to whatever 2-3 meters of massive sulfide mineralization that we get, we could get much more significant mineralizations or grades of gold and silver from the fluids as they flowed through the whole section on their way to the smoker system that eventually spewed it out as massive sulfides. So the market is looking at all this and thinking, even if the results come back, not clearly defining a major new discovery like the 21B zone when that hole 109 was reported, they have developed the context in a way that completely resets the perception of Eskay Mining's SIB Quarry project, where they have 20 kilometers of strike, and there's only maybe about 15, 20 kilometers of VMS perspective. Farther south, it's a different type of geology, going to be a different type of mineralization. But heading into 2021, there's going to be a lot of optimism that this play will emerge with a significant discovery in the TV Jeff zone. And when they reveal the rest of the anomalies that showed up this summer through their geophysical surveys, there may be some additional juicy targets. And then there is still, of course, where we know the contact mudstone in the western limb projects underneath the Bowser Lake sediments, where everybody had misunderstood the Coulter Creek thrust, thought it came from the east and went up to the west, when in fact it's the Bowser sediments that came from the west and were slid up over the stratigraphy. So nobody has ever tested where the contact mudstone unit, which is the time horizon for the Eskay Creek deposit, where this actually sits to the south on the SIB Lulu project. So 2021 is shaping up to be a very interesting year for this company, and it's unusual to see the market saying, we're not going to wait for the December sell-off. We're going to just keep buying this because this is shaping up to be a great discovery play in 2021.
We'll have more with John Kaiser right after this.
Aben Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Aben's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at abenresources.com.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with John Kaiser. John, why did Kodiak Copper drop today after releasing additional results for its MPD copper gold project in southern British Columbia?
Well, on September 3rd, they released results for two holes. Hole number 1, which was not particularly interesting, and partial results for hole number 4, which was 100 meters south of hole number 1. And this was in the gate zone, which was a part of the property that hadn't already been Swiss cheesed. They intersected a sort of so-so grade mineralization in 2019, and they were following it up this year when that hole number 4 yielded a 282 meter interval of 0.7% copper and 0.49 gram per ton gold plus a silver kicker. But this was between 263 and 545 meters, which means that most of it was below the open pittable limit. So this is the kind of mineralization that where you would, if you're going to mine it, you would do it with block caving, such as is being done at the Red Chris deposit, whose upper portion is, typical BC copper gold type mineralization. But when you get deeper into the roots, beyond the open pittable portion, the grade increases substantially, and that is what Newcrest is after now with a block caving scenario, to go underground and mine the richer copper gold mineralization that can go down to substantial depths. So what the market didn't like about today's news was that hole number 2 which undercuts hole number 1, has pretty much the same sort of mediocre 0.28% copper and 0.08 gram per ton gold over 276 meters. Similar to, this was what hole number 1 was. Hole number 2 is very similar. So on that section of the gate zone, the mineralization at depth is not block caving grade. And what they didn't like about number 4, where they reported the upper portions and the lower portions, was that in the lower portion, the grade goes back to being mediocre. Now, in a sense, one should have expected that, because clearly they rushed the middle portion of hole number 4 for assay, because they could tell it was going to run well. But what really doesn't make sense is that Teck, who should know the difference between a good porphyry and a mediocre porphyry, put up $10.5 million at $1.95, and the company managed to raise another $2 million last month for $12.5 million at $1.95, basically on the expectation that even though the near surface stuff's going to be mediocre copper gold zone, the deeper part's going to be enriched. But the much deeper part is apparently not going to be enriched. Now we have two more holes, 5, 6, and 7. They are overcuts and undercuts, for which results are still pending. The ones on the hole 4 section, those ones are important. There will be one to the west and one to the east. And what the market will want to see is that at least that middle segment between sort of 300 and 600 meter vertical depth, that we're going to see similar grades as we saw for that range in the first results reported for hole number 4 in early September. But the problem, when you look so far at the footprint, you take 100 meters of strike for the zone and you give it a width of say 200 meters and a thickness of 300 meters, you're still only talking about a relatively small tonnage footprint, at best approaching 10 million tons. So this system needs to get much, much bigger to stay interesting as a block caving exercise. And at the moment, they appear to have paused drilling, waiting for the rest of these results. But the initial 7 holes are not going to define a substantially large body with enriched grades at depth. And it is the confirmation that when you go deeper, then the grade goes back to the mediocre level. And people are now thinking maybe this is going to be like 2013 when Colorado intersected a very good copper-gold intersection on its North Rock project in the Golden Triangle, which was not that far from the Red Chris project, and it had grades similar to the deeper part of the Red Chris deposit. And the market thought, oh, maybe we have a near-surface version of the deeper part of Red Chris showing up here on this North Rock project. At the end of the day, it turned out that they just happened to hitch a localized zone of enrichment, and the stock, which had spiked up to $1.75, ended up crashing afterwards. We hope at Kodiak Copper this is not going to be a similar situation where there is simply a tabular enriched portion of a general, BC-style copper gold system. We'll need to see a lot more holes drilled to show that there is some size to this type of new discovery that they have. But yes, that's why the market reacted negatively today.
We'll have more with John Kaiser right after this.
Value from success. Growth in discovery. Golden Arrow Resources is a well-funded gold-copper exploration company with proven management and prospective properties in Chile, Argentina, and Paraguay. Golden Arrow trades on the Toronto Venture Exchange, symbol GRG, on Frankfurt, symbol G6A, and the OTCQB, symbol GARWF. For more information, visit us at goldenarrowresources.com or call Sean at 778-686-0135.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with John Kaiser. John, last year in May, while we were starting to dread the drill results for Midland's Mithril copper play, you introduced Harfang Exploration and its Serpent project as an alternative copper play for the James Bay region. Harfang reached an all-time high this week. Does Harfang have a discovery?
Harfang does not yet have a discovery, but heading into 2021, it may have the most interesting exploration play for the James Bay region. Now, the Serpent project emerged in 2017 when Francois Goulet, who had taken his private prospect generator company backed by Virginia's Andre Gaumond public through an RTO of a shell in 2016, he had this Lake Maternack play that he was pretty keen about, but even he was starting to think, these are sheer vein quartz systems with sort of gold here and there, and it wasn't adding up to a lot. And with Eleanor as the standard to beat, and Eleanor itself to some degree dismissed by the market as saying, well, if we knew everything we did about it today, it would never have been bought for $750 million and put into production for $1.3 billion. The bar is quite high for what counts as a legitimate discovery in the James Bay region that deserves to be developed. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Quebec Precious Metals and the Sakami project with the La Pointe system and the La Pointe extension. And that system, it's been going nowhere because they want to hit that 2 million ounce threshold, which is perceived to be the minimum, and this would be started at least as an open pit mining system. But that gold system, the grades rarely get above 6 grams per ton gold. It's going to be a lower grade bulk tonnage type system. And Francois Goulet looked at this area and he said, Sakami's interesting, but what else is in that area? And this led him to the so-called Serpent, which is a 15, 20 kilometer long mag anomaly that winds its way in a southwest direction to the southwest of the Sakami project. And most of it was staked by LaSalle Exploration, but Harfang went in there, staked the surrounding ground, and said, structurally this is very interesting. It appears to be at the craton margin, that, they quickly figured out that the Serpent itself, it's an ultramafic intrusion that doesn't really have any interesting mineralization associated with it. But they started looking at that area and did several till surveys, some of which kicked copper in the eastern part of the property. And that's what I was talking about in May of last year when we were waiting for the drill results on the mithril drilling. Here they had found copper values along with some gold values in the eastern part of the Serpent project, and they named all these showings after snakes such as python, viper, and boa, and they even called it the viper trend. But the till survey in 2018 had kicked some interesting gold numbers to the west, and they did another one in 2019, and that came up even better with pristine gold grains in it, like sizable ones, like 0.5 millimeter, where you might even be able to see it with a naked eye, not just a microscope. And it was in the western part of the property where the geophysics, when they looked hard at it, it said there is a structural break here, and it runs for at least 4 kilometers, and everything to the north of it, the till samples came back empty, but there was a 2-3 kilometer dispersal train along 4 kilometer strike to the south of these gold in till anomalies. And they decided this was going to become the exclusive focus for the company this year. They've gone out there and done prospecting. They've done in 3 places what they call the Anna, the Sasquatch, and the Moby Dick. They stripped away the dirt and revealed quartz veins, pretty good size within a Abro setting, and come up with high gold values. They're sort of sporadic. It's not like you have huge, obvious gold mineralization, but the grades spike very high. In one case, it was up to 228 grams per ton. So this is very different from what's going on at Quebec Precious Metals La Pointe gold system. And this year, they've done more till sampling, and they flew a geophysical survey on 50-meter spacing, low altitude, to try and figure out where are the structural controls within this system of northwest-west trending gabbroic dikes that have invaded this area a long time ago and appear to play some role in the way that the fluids have ascended. And the problem that has emerged is that just to the south of what they call the stew structure, there is a swamp that's about 200 meters wide, and it runs about 2,700 meters, almost the entire length of the structure. And so not only do they have no outcrop samples, no till samples, no soil samples, even the geophysical data is a bit of a black hole because of the clay in the swamp, which macks the underlying magnetic structures that would reveal the controls, the features, the structural features through which fluids would have ascended. And in conventional geology, when you get a swamp in an area like this, it means that the rock is recessive, that it's weaker than the surrounding rocks and the glaciers. They come around and gouge it out. In the case of kimberlites, which form these lakes, the kimberlite is naturally softer than the surrounding rocks. In this case, it would be where there has been a lot of fracturing because of a structural shear of some sort and fluid flow that's altered the material so that it's naturally weaker and would have been gouged out along the south of the main structural break, which could have been the primary feeder into the system. And here, right, the perfect setting where you could be drilling, should be drilling, you have no data whatsoever. So they're now waiting for the more detailed till sample and program they did to infill this so that they can make a case for going in there in January when the swamp is frozen and say, we have all this gold being shed from this stew structure, and clearly it's not on the other side up ice from the stew structure. This black hole, what one might even call the anti-Patwan, which in the case of Azimuth's Elmer project was an outcropping segment, 200 meters of outcropping rock where the channel sample got great grades and then drilled it, and we had the Patwan discovery earlier this year. In that case, nothing much seems to have shown up in the swamp to the southwest and northeast of the original Patwan outcrop. It's as if being stronger, more silicified than everything else, indicated this was where the gold was, and where it was weaker, the gold wasn't. Here we have a case where we're seeing interesting gold in the rocks that do outcrop in and around the swamp, but the swamp itself is this black hole, the anti-Patwan, which when drilled next year could deliver finally a very interesting discovery for the James Bay region. And when Francois told me that, I said, yeah, the James Bay region never going to really have a truly world-class discovery. But then he said something which I thought was really interesting. He said that this area here is not your standard greenstone, Abitibi greenstone type geology, and much of the James Bay area is greenstone, and everybody who's been looking there for gold, they've been looking for Abitibi-style shears and veins associated with big structural breaks, of which there aren't any clearly obvious ones, to try and find the same sort of gold deposits as the Abitibi is famous for. And this myopia actually helped them overlook the copper potential. So far, the copper potential for the James Bay region has not delivered. The mithril play failed last year. Right now, we're waiting for Azimuth to finish its drill program on the Piqua project, where it has 10 kilometers of trend where there are high-grade copper boulders in the first 5 kilometers, and the rest is buried under overburden. We'll hope maybe we'll get a serious copper discovery out of that before the end of the year. But the reason that was overlooked all these years was because of the gold focus, and Francois has said it's the Abitibi-style gold focus that has prevented people from realizing that maybe the James Bay region is different. And he says this area is on the edge of a craton. It appears to have been a pull-apart basin that got invaded by all these gabbroic dikes, which helped create structural preparation for, fluid ascending. And then something else happened to cause the fluids to come up and find their home in this gold mineralization that they're seeing the peripheries of. And he says this looks very similar to what the Kalgoorlie system in Western Australia is all about. And that district is famous for its high-grade gold. So he hasn't published anything yet in terms of cartoons and that showing why the analog is similar to Western Australia. But if there is substance to his hypothesizing, this could be a very interesting development next year. If they drill it in Q1 of this year, they have $4 million in the bank, so they don't need to farm it out. They don't need to raise any more. A fence of holes across the swamp will very quickly tell a lot of information about the structural controls of any gold mineralization. This could be finally what puts James Bay on the world's gold map.
John, thank you so much for the update.
You're welcome, Jim.
We've been speaking with John Kaiser, his website, kaiserresearch.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on Discovery Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at howstreet.com. Discovery Watch is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.